Very good afternoon. Thanks for joining us here on Inspire India. I am Afrida Rahman Ali. There is death and despair, no doubt, but there is also hope and humanity. And that is the whole idea of bringing to you this episode of Inspire India, where we bring you stories where we will show you how people are doing their bit with their own limited means to help out those around them so that they don't feel alone. That's the big idea. We are featuring stories of courage and fortitude that inspire us all. These are stories that actually make the silver lining to India's COVID cloud. Sometimes hardships bring out the good in us, and therefore it's important to celebrate that spirit, which is exactly what we are going to do. When in a situation of hardship, those among us who step up to help out, those among us who surface as the brave hearts, the good Samaritans, the do-gooders, the philanthropists. We are going to feature two such stories today, one from Bangalore and the other from Gurugram. So let me, without any ado, introduce our guests on Inspire India today. Suhas Kaul, Director of Wheels Eye, a trucking logistics company from Gurugram, joining us on Inspire India, and Ayman Muiz, who is actually a fourth-year BDS student from Bengaluru. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to begin with the story of Suhas Kaul. And what we have actually gathered is that this is again a unique initiative. Suhas Kaul, like I mentioned, is the director at a trucking logistics company called Wheels Eye. They created a portal where people can ask for any kind of help they need. So what we are given to understand is that Mr. Kaul is flooded with requests for oxygen, ICU, ventilator beds, and has managed to book beds for those in dire need. Remember, there's a huge level of desperation in Delhi. The crisis is of immense proportion, where the number of beds have fallen short for the kind of demand that is generated because of the high number of cases. And somebody like Mr. Kaul is helping out those who need help in such an hour of crisis. Very good afternoon, Mr. Suhas Kaul. I want to begin by asking you, you're also involved in helping patients from economically weaker sections. You are arranging free doctor appointments, I'm told, and oximeters. How many people have you managed to reach out so far? Tell us about your journey so far and how difficult it must be for you to attend to these calls on a day-to-day basis, Mr. Kaul.
Okay. So first of all, thank you for such kind words. I'm just trying to help in any possible way. I started my journey with just creating a portal because, to be fair, I didn't know how to help. I was feeling helpless by listening to news and, listening to these stories. So I just created an online portal where people can ask for any kind of request. Initially, I thought that probably people will ask for food,
Yes.
like they are probably stuck alone and stuff like that. So it will be easy. But all the kind of requests that I kept getting was like, I need an ICU bed. Some relative is serious and I need an ICU or a ventilator bed. And in the initial few days, I just felt helpless as in how to help. I actually set up a team of volunteers which will check with the hospitals whether the beds are available or not. But interestingly, whichever hospital the bed was available, 5 minutes later, the bed wasn't available anymore. And in this journey, I just lost few people, which were very, very critical. Even though we managed to get people some oxygen beds, but like people who were critical, we lost it. And like, I actually tweeted it also. I was feeling that initial couple of days, I was feeling really helpless at that time. But after that, I thought like, I can't just be sitting at home. So I actually went from hospital to hospital. At certain times, I actually paid the full booking amount so that like people with 36 SpO2, which is very critical state, I've gotten beds for people like that. I paid the entire booking amount and I waited for them to come so that they can join. They can, get because patients like these, they can't even move from one hospital to another. So I zeroed in on this particular critical need.
Absolutely.
And just this critical need, and then just let the team handle other oxygen beds and all those things. Like because it can still wait, but for these critical patients where oxygen is from 30 to 50, it's very critical. They cannot survive even 1 or 2 hours without oxygen. So that was it.
Absolutely. Every minute becomes critical. It's like a situation of hanging between life and death. So those are the people you're reaching out to. Let me just tell you that, for something of this nature, the service that you are rendering, we must extend a heartfelt gratitude, because you're doing this in the true spirit of humanity, in the true spirit of patriotism. It's all very well to say, it's very difficult to do these things. It's a lot of legwork, like you're explaining to us how you are having to do it on a day-to-day basis. Hats off to you. Stay on with us, Suhas Kaul. I'm going to introduce also Ayman Muiz, who's joining us from Bengaluru. Very warm welcome to you, Mr. Muiz. Now, Mr. Muiz's initiative, let me just acquaint our viewers with the kind of work he is doing, where since last year, he's been involved with distribution of ration kits to needy people, travel kits for migrants. When cases started increasing drastically, Ayman Muiz guided and counseled patients right from where to get tested, which medicines to take for home isolation cases, which hospital to go to. Until the end of the treatment, he would stick around with patients who couldn't manage the logistics themselves. On a daily basis, Muiz and his team of volunteers guide families to contact BBMP War Room for bed blocking, also helps in cremation and burial. Again, a very critical area where people need help. Sometimes own family members back out from going ahead and cremating their loved ones. It has happened. Many have abandoned the deceased as well. Ayman Muiz, I want to begin by asking you, in these kind of situations, in extremely difficult conditions that you are working, patients are often paranoid. Have you also had to deal with situations like what Suhas was telling us, where oxygen levels are dropping, there are people gasping for breaths, and then you are having to do your bit to save their lives?
Absolutely, ma'am. We usually wake up with calls starting with, saturation 30, saturation 45. They don't have an oxygen cylinder beside them. They're running one hospital to the another hospital. There's absolutely nothing that the family can do. They call up in that kind of situation. It's just absolutely helpless, absolutely helpless. So we try to do our bit. We try to contact every possible lead we have. We contact the BBMP, we contact 108, we contact other hospitals, private hospitals we are in touch with. So we try easing this process. We try to help the family as much as possible with a very short duration of time. We try to, we find a bed for them. If not a bed, till we find a bed, we find a cylinder for them. Just easing this till we find a bed for them. Yeah.
Right. Yes. So, for anyone to actually pitch in this area is not a joke. It really takes a lot of courage and fortitude. It takes a lot of resilience as well, because sometimes, one tends to panic. One tends to actually feel helpless, on their own, seeing this kind of distress situations. I would like to ask both our guests on the kind of challenges they have faced so far. Suhas Kaul, like I said, it cannot be simple. It cannot be easy. I'm sure there are a lot of stumbling blocks. There are hurdles that you face when you go about doing something like this.
Yes, definitely. We are currently in a pandemic, and I don't think like India's infrastructure was supposed to handle the surge of patients. So even after getting first of all, the infrastructure is not there. So you might run from one hospital to the other. But at the end of the day, out of the 10 people, you're bound to help only 2 or 3, because the rest 7 do not get a bed, no matter what you try. So no matter how many lives you save, there are always more lives which you have not been able to help. So it is sort of a helpless situation because the infrastructure is not supporting. So that was the helpless situation I actually encountered. And
yes,
I actually talked to my doctor friends also. So they said that the primary hospitalization is happening because of the delay in medication. So that is where, like you mentioned in the beginning, I'm also helping poor and needy and people from economically weaker sections cannot afford medication. And the primary mindset there is that they live in denial in the beginning that, oh, it's probably common cold, it's probably a normal viral. Till 4th, 5th day, when they actually start having some breathing problems. And that is the point where they need hospitalization. And even the other problem, the other challenge is even the basic nursing home or basic hospital facilities are costing 40 to 50K in a city like Faridabad. And that particularly means that if this person from economically weaker section has to go to the hospital, there's obviously no chance for survival. So the only way you can save these people is by providing right medication at the beginning. So I started this other initiative actually from this particular challenge that I was facing, that how to get fewer people to hospitalize. So how to actually basically solve, so without actually having COVID positive report, just by having COVID symptoms, if you're having mild fever, if you're having cold, if you're having anything, we were actually giving free oximeters, we were giving free medicines and all those things. It was primarily to not overload our hospitals. So that was the challenge, and that is how I solved. The other primary challenge is because of this fear, because in the new double mutant this virus, it's like highly contagious. So I'm not finding enough people to work on the ground. So
yes,
that is the other challenge. So yeah, that's primarily like the big challenges that I'm facing right now.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is, of course, a risk to your own health and safety as well. I mean, Muiz, आपसे ये भी जानना चाहूँगी, if you can explain to us that, compared to the first wave, are the challenges very different this time around because of the severity of the cases? What Suhas was also telling us, that at a time like this, the proportion is huge. The magnitude of the problem, the numbers are far bigger. And anything, in a more limited way can always be handled by the hospitals. But because it is spilling over, people like you are coming in handy to handle the situation, I mean.
Firstly, I would like to mention, first wave, we had good resources. There were not as many patients. There were not, and the saturations which people used to come and people used to maintain were far better. Usually we used to get calls and we used to get requests for around 85 to 70. It still is manageable. You still can push them for an ICU. You still can go for an HDU bed. But in this wave, the problem here is, first of all, we don't have an oxygen cylinder till we find a bed for them. Even if the saturation of the patient is 85, until we find a bed for them, the saturation drops down to 60. So there's absolutely nothing you can do at that moment of time. Second of all, when you start looking for a bed, it becomes so... For example, I just want to highlight this thing. For example, if there's one bed available in a BBMP quota, it is so, it gets filled up within seconds. I clearly mentioning, within seconds, there's someone else waiting there. There are like 900 and thousands of waiting lists which is there. So, finding a bed for these and lower middle class and middle class people have been majorly impacted. They cannot afford a private hospital. There's absolutely no way they are affording a private hospital. So we have to rush them for a government-based facility. And government facilities are overloaded, absolutely over. Their emergencies are overloaded. They are putting NIVs and they're putting oxygen beds in the emergencies, and they're filled. They're waiting line outside the gates of the hospitals. This is the current situation in Bangalore. This is absolutely the current situation. I think
because you know why? I might also like to point out here that in your city, the daily cases are upwards of 20,000 per day, and this has been a consistent figure since the beginning of this month. So if there are 20,000 positive cases, even if a small percentage of that require hospitalization, to generate that many new beds on a daily basis becomes extremely difficult, especially in a situation where already the hospitals are packed, they are full, they are running to full capacity. To generate that many cases on a daily basis, even if a small percentage require hospitalization, it's a real crisis situation. And again, kudos to you, for handling this. Similarly, Suhas Kaul, if I can ask you about Gurugram, the overall situation is quite pathetic. The positivity rate on the 7-day average that I'm looking at in Gurugram is 28.9%. It's 29%. Roughly 1/3 of of all the people tested are turning positive. Which again compounds the problem for healthcare workers, for hospitals. They are not able to deal with the numbers. Is that something that you are observing as well?
Yes, definitely. As in, it has been the case from day one. There are far many cases, and these are the cases that you're talking about, like people who have tested. There are a lot of people who we encounter on a day-to-day basis where the test reports haven't come and their oxygen levels have deteriorated. So it's much worse than these statistics. If you actually are on the ground, the situation is really, really grim. And not just that, I think everyone is actually sort of in the midway taking advantage also to a certain extent, because hospitals also, they're not taking insurance at certain times, they're taking money in cash. So it just adds to the problem. It's not just hospital beds, it's a lot of other problems that are there on the ground. So yeah.
Yes, very important what you pointed out. And somebody like you who's working on ground would know so much better about how, even in this kind of a situation, there are those who are trying to make a fast buck. There are those who are trying to cheat, to overcharge, to hoard medicines. Again, like you said, the statistics are far higher on ground than what we are reporting. That's a known fact by now, that official figures are underreporting the real situation. I mean, Muiz, what would you tell us about Bengaluru? Are the figures that we are getting far less than what you are actually encountering on ground?
Absolutely, ma'am. Ma'am, the first things is when I'm talking about a common man. Absolutely, first thing is we have a thing say first 2 days when the patient has fever or cough, he's in denial. He'll be like it's a flu or something like that. So they let that period go, and when he starts to have breathlessness and all of that, so they rush to any facility which is providing a swab test, an RT-PCR, and a rapid test. They rush there, but the report comes in only after 2 days. In this short period of time, within 2 days and 2.5 days, and there is one more thing called BU number in Bangalore. So this BU number helps the patient gets a government facility bed. It is quite important for us, for a Bangalorean, to have this kind of number so that he gets a free bed in a government facility. So this number to be generated will take quite a 3 days, 3.5 days. So at this moment of time, the saturation dips. Even if the patient goes for testing around having a saturation of 95 or 90, there are so many cases we have seen that saturation is dropped to 80. Saturation is dropped to 85, 70 also sometimes. So in this moment of time, there is no hospital ready to take them because they don't have a positive report. Even if there's a private facility ready to take them, the thing is they're not able to afford. So they'll be like, we'll stay at home. So the situation worsens and they reach to 45 and 30. They keep calling, I'm doing something, I'm losing my dad, I'm losing my mom. What do I do? What am I supposed to do at this situation of time? So it becomes very pathetic. It genuinely is very scary, very, very scary to handle these kind of patients. We just have to have a better infrastructure, I think, to handle these kind of cases. Absolutely common man and us do anything as such.
Yes, but will lessons be learned, I mean, Muiz? That's something we have to wait and see. Will lessons be learned that all this while we did not focus enough on building the health infrastructure to cope with a situation like this? And, the second wave was coming. Everyone knew it, but we were so underprepared. And now when you and Suhas tell us the real picture, that really exposes how short we have fallen from meeting the requirements of our own people. Suhas Kaul, do you also believe that the government has failed in certain areas? They could have done better in Gurugram, for instance. Where exactly do you see lapses in the district administration handling the COVID management situation?
Well, actually, I see no infrastructure being there. As in, for people who are this critical, for example, people who have SpO2 levels, oxygen saturation levels from 40 to 60, like where do they go? Like even people like us are clueless. Like even patients like us who are from like much privileged backgrounds, like we are clueless, like on where to go. I'm not even talking about 70% of India. And this is a tier 1 city situation. I'm not even talking about tier 2, tier 3 cities where like even the dispensaries don't have medicines, where the hospitals don't have doctors. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the best hospitals, and I've seen the faces of the doctors being so helpless that they don't have oxygen. They're like what can we do? Like, there's absolutely nothing that they can do. They're as helpless. The hospitals are helpless. Like, they have much more beds, but there is no oxygen. Like, what do you do? I've seen people waiting outside. Like, they don't have oxygen. Like, there is an elderly couple which we helped. We actually tried to get them ICU beds for 2 consecutive days. In Rohini, we actually arranged one ICU bed over there, but when they reached there, it was already occupied. Then we had to actually manage oxygen cylinders and send them to Jammu. They traveled 600 kilometers to get an ICU bed. So it's anything and everything possible that we did in our purview, but we don't know like how government is helping. Like, I absolutely have no clue. Like, there's obviously some facilities like Radhaswamy and all those things in Delhi that they built, and now it's still better than probably the first and the second week. It's much better because now the government has converted all the hospitals to COVID facilities. There are increased number of beds, so there is some hope. It's still better, but In the initial 1-2 weeks, it was an absolute nightmare. It was an absolute nightmare.
Okay. So like you said, let's hope that, things will get better from here, since you're saying that, yes, slowly but surely things are improving. You have helped out close to 15,000 people so far. That's a very big number, Suhas. Let me just extend, my heartfelt gratitude once again, both to you and Amin. And Amin, one last word from you, a little on a personal note, that how do you motivate yourself to do something like this? Like I said, for a girl like you, there's so many other things that you could have involved yourself in and indulged and enjoyed like many others are doing. What makes you, leave everything else and do this instead?
Ma'am, I personally believe that if someone else suffering, how can you enjoy that period of time when you know you could have improved his life, even for a bit, not much, but how it is important. The point is that the way they suffer, the way they call you up, they're crying. A 50-year-old man, they keep calling you and telling me, I'm losing my son, I'm losing my daughter. It's just, there's no point of enjoyment in pandemic. What I've realized is it's just making someone else's life better. I think I genuinely believe this. Okay, making someone else's life better, even if it's a very small effort putting in. This could be you. What I believe, this could be you. The other person on the line could be you. Could be asking for that help, and you wouldn't want to deny. You wouldn't want that person to deny your help, right? You would want everyone to help you at that situation of time. So I try to do my bit. It's not much, I understand, but I try to do my bit. We all, not just me and all of my group members, all of the volunteers, and everyone with us are trying to do that bit. We are awake. Actually, we are awake 24/7. We do as much as possible. We pitch in as how much ever we can. We are trying to do our bit at this moment of time. We're just hoping for things will change. I hope.
Right.
Yes.
Yes, in fact, how inspiring is that? And thank you so much, Amin Muiz and Suhas Kaul, for joining us today. This is what religion actually teaches us, isn't it? The compassion, the humanity, the empathy that you are showing towards others around you who need help at the moment. Thanks for joining us on Inspire India.